Yo, what it do, good people? Welcome back to the Daniel Diagnosis. I am your host, Keith Daniel. I hope everybody has been safe, productive, and blessed since the last time that we spoke or the last time we ran into each other. Happy New Year. It's the first video that I done made this year, and I apologize for that. But this has been a hectic time for me, not in a bad way. It's just a lot of work that I got to be done out here, and I'm one of them guys that's been tapped on the shoulder to do the work, like many of you. Okay, but I wear many hats, and I just don't have the luxury to sit here in front of the camera and produce video and video and video after video. That ain't how my day work. You know what I mean? I'm a business owner, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a community leader, I'm an activist, I'm a philanthropist. Like, I do a lot. See what I'm saying? But anyway, still, work got to be done, and I got to get back to these videos. So this is one of them times to where I'm trying to catch up. So I apologize for not being consistent, but I also want to tell my day ones, thank you for your patience. Now, what we're going to get into today, y'all, let me flip the screen real quick so we can talk to each other. I can talk to you and you can see me and feel me, what I'm saying. So what we're going to get into today, y'all, is a video that one of my close friends actually sent me. Of course, yesterday was MLK Day. Okay, so what better time would it be to rock it, to get into some 1963 civil rights movement agenda rabbit hole stuff. You see what I'm saying? So this video was sent to me by my partner, all right? And the title of the video is 6 Great Black Americans on 1963 Primetime TV, Amazing Dialogue. The video was made by David Hoffman. Who is David Hoffman? David Hoffman is a filmmaker and a director, okay? I'm just going to read the description that he put in the video, and because I think that'll sum it up better than me just coming out here and getting y'all a whole lot of, my speculation. Okay. Before I get into reading the description, let me put out the disclaimers real quick. This is, I just want to say that fair use. That's how I'm using this, is fair use. The reason I'm using this video is for strictly educational and entertainment purposes only. All right. Number 2, my channel is an intellectual channel. What does that mean? If you do not have the intellectual capacity to entertain a thought without accepting it, this channel or this show may not be for you. All right. With that being said, let me read the description. I have kept this video recording since shortly after it was made. So powerful. Such an incredible moment and dialogue. It was the spring of 1963. These leaders were planning the now famous March on Washington. The voting rights bill was being debated before Congress. The same with a food stamps bill for poor people. Participating in this live primetime television dialogue were James Foreman, Whitney Young, Martin Luther King, and Roy Wilkins. All powerful civil rights leaders representing the NAACP, the National Urban League, the Congress on Racial Equality, the SCCC, and the SCLC. Issues discussed include Lyndon Johnson and the Southern Dixiecrats, the voting rights bill, the bus boycotts, the lunch counter sit-ins, the effort to register voters in Mississippi, and more. I found these 5 men so intelligent and informed and passionate and articulate that, as I said in the video, watching this with my parents motivated me as a young man to go to Washington and participate in the march where Martin Luther King and others spoke. I post it now with the conviction that it will have meaning for all those concerned with the issues being debated in America today. Now, here's what throws me off. He said 5. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. I guess the host was the host had to be a black guy as well. That's what I'm taking, because he only named 5 people, and it's 6 people here in the video that I'm looking at. And so I'm supposing that the 6th black person is the host of the show. All right, now, real quick, if you have any inkling of history, you understand that 1963, we were right in the midst of the civil rights movement. And that time period cultivated our culture that we live in today as Americans. It was a lot that was sacrificed back then. A lot of people lost their lives for these rights and benefits that we have now. And I know mainstream media, everybody has their perspective of certain civil rights leaders back in that day, particularly Martin Luther King. You know, you have some that say he was this and you have some that say he was that. However, I think that all of those men back then that had the heart to speak up and had the courage to say something, they were giants amongst men. Okay? And we don't need to lose that thought. Point blank, period. Yes, we can understand certain things as far as where we at right now and some of the deceitfulness that we had to be exposed to, and the lies that were told to us and things of that nature. I get all that. But still, you have to understand how difficult it was back in that period. They didn't even have the basic civil rights. And they still went, and they knew in doing what they did, the mob was coming. They knew it, but they still did it. So we have to take our hat off and we have to salute those guys, man. And that's why I want to get into this conversation, because I'm very curious to actually hear exactly what they were talking about and how it relates to our everyday life today. You know what I mean? So with that being said, man, we're going to get right on into it. Hopefully the internet don't crash on my end, because I've been having internet problems. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know what it is. I don't went to the point. I mean, I have 2 internet providers now. You know, I was thinking that maybe it's the lag time with my internet. So I got another internet provider, which is a separate, different modem. You know what I mean? But it seems like I'm still having problems. So now the conspiratorial side of me kicks in and be like, these motherfuckers, these people monitoring me, you know what I mean, or something like that. Because it seems like once I start trying to make certain videos, a net goes around my internet and I ain't able to broadcast. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully we won't have any problems. But either way, we're going to try our best. So with that being said, man, I'm going to shut my mouth for a second. This is a reaction video, so I will interrupt and intervene from time to time. But I'm going to try my level best to hold my comments until the end. So I hope you enjoy. I hope it's informative. All right? So go on and roll up. Go on and pull up. Whatever it is you got to do to get yourself comfortable and get your mind and get your mind in the aspect of working and thinking and having your thinking cap on. But we're going down the rabbit hole once again. I appreciate everybody. To my day ones, thank you for your patience. You know, it is what it is. So without further ado, let's rock and roll, good people. Let us rock and roll.
100 frustrating years after the Emancipation Proclamation, the Negro community has arrived at a decision to celebrate this centennial in an all-out effort to achieve full rights now.
You're watching a live national television show that was broadcast in the spring of 1963. It's more than 60 years old, and yet I feel it's so relevant to issues we face in the United States today. It's also amazing because of the eloquence of these 5 American black leaders who are about to discuss the state of the American Negro. I'm David Hoffman, filmmaker. I didn't shoot this, but I was a college senior and I was watching this show on television with my parents, and what I saw affected me, and it made me decide to go down to Washington and attend the March on Washington that summer. It also got me to make my first documentary, which is posted on my channel, from 1963, about migrant workers in Riverhead, Long Island, near where I lived. So look, before I run this amazing show, I got to tell you a little bit of background, which I think will matter to you. It was the spring of 1963. President Kennedy is exciting the nation with the feeling that all kinds of new things are going to happen and America is going to be great. It's also 100 years after the Congress passed the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves. There was new and bold legislation before Congress, and it was exciting legislation because it had to do with voting rights, giving Negroes, as they said at the time, the right to vote and making certain that they could vote. To support this legislation, the 5 major Negro organizations in America announced that they were going to have this march in Washington to support the legislation. The issue of civil rights in America had been fomenting for several years. 1960-61, black students in the South began to protest by sitting in at lunch counters. Martin Luther King in the late 1950s had had his bus boycott and the march in Birmingham, and other things were happening around the country that those of us in the North, people like me, were watching, very sympathetic to what the students were trying to do, get people to vote. So National Educational Television, the forerunner of PBS, decided to do this live show with 5 Negro leaders, the top guys, talking about what they hoped would happen at this march. It's prophetic. What they're saying so long ago is so relevant to what people are saying and thinking and troubled by today. There was Roy Wilkins, the head of the NAACP. There was Whitney Young Jr., the head of the Urban League. There was James Farmer, the head of the Congress on Racial Equality, CORE. There was James Foreman, the head of SNCC, who had been training students in Mississippi to attempt to register voters. I knew young people who were attending these training sessions who went south, and I thought they were heroes. This was scary stuff. And there was the Reverend Martin Luther King, the head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The host was Dr. Kenneth Clark, a professor at New York's City University. So much of this is relevant, as I said, and I'm going to post a link in the description to the film I made as a result of seeing this program.
Gentlemen, I certainly want to thank you for taking time out of a terribly busy schedule to talk with us this evening. I know that the entire country, and certainly the President of the United States and some congressmen, would like to know about the plans for a march on Washington. Mr. Wilkins, would you like to tell us what are the plans as of this date?
The plan is for a huge march to the Lincoln Memorial and a meeting there. On the way, what was described as a brief demonstration at the White House. But we hope to have this an outpouring of expression on the part of the people who wish Congress and the nation to know how they feel, how very deeply they feel about civil rights legislation. I think it's fair to say, wouldn't you say, Martin, that this is no attempt to blackjack anybody. We want to show how we feel.
Exactly. We are not going to Washington to intimidate any congressman or any senator. It will give a large number of people an opportunity to articulate their longings and aspirations for freedom, their desire to see meaningful, forthright civil rights legislation in this session of Congress. And of course, we also intend to arouse the conscience of the nation over the economic plight of the Negro 100 years after emancipation. And I think it can have a great impact. I think it will dramatize the issue. It will have educational value in that it will allow many people to see and understand the continued indignities and injustices which Negroes confront all over the nation.
All over the country, it has captured the imagination of hundreds of thousands of people. Now, we don't know how many of them will be marching to Washington, but a goodly number will. They feel keenly about this, and they want the seat of government. They want the American conscience to know how they feel.
You're aware that the president has cautioned that he would just as soon have the march postponed or not occur.
We see this as an all-inclusive demonstration of our belief in the president's program, and since it has been declared to be an orderly demonstration with a rally, at which time I hope to be one of the people who will speak in the interest of the Urban League toward preparing people for the new opportunities. At this level, we will be cooperating.
And I think it's important that the march go off because there is legislation which many people have gone to jail for the substance. That is, the lunch counter demonstrations throughout the South have to be sort of brought to some climax, and it could be done in this public accommodations bill, which is before the Congress. Then, of course, it just left the Delta and a lot of poor people over there, people who make $2.25 a day for 12 hours of work. And so some legislation has to come out of the Congress of the United States to deal with these problems.
Drinking ice water flushes 1 pound of belly fat every day. People are flushing.
People like Agnes Myers, Roy, president of the board of the NAACP, and other white liberals and friends have cautioned against having a major demonstration for civil rights this summer. How do you...
Well, it's our position in the NAACP that the opponents of civil rights legislation left no doubt as soon as the president spoke. In fact, they didn't wait for him to speak. They began announcing their opposition and what they intended to do. They were going to filibuster, they were going to hold up appropriation measures, they were scaring the country that they weren't going to get a tax cut on account of civil rights. They're doing all the boogeyman stunts. And if they're going to use Washington as their base of operations for opposition to this bill, we don't see anything wrong with using Washington as our base to indicate support for this bill. And
now that was powerful. He said if they're going to use Washington to be their base, to be the opposition of civil rights, then their mindset was they're going to, being the black leaders at this time, they were going to use Washington as their base as well to push this legislation. All right? Now, we got to understand civil rights here, okay? Civil rights are basically your God-given rights to existence here on earth. You see what I'm saying? We, in our generation, we're so far removed from what those guys had to go through, those giants had to go through, to the degree of we can't even fathom what was going on back then. You know, in 1963, just think about it. My mama was 5 years old. You see what I'm saying? We don't even understand how bad it was. Period. It was bad, man. And the powers that be at that time was so headstrong on not giving us anything. Nothing. Period. They wanted to continue to treat us like we weren't human. All right? I just wanted to put that in perspective.
in my estimation, this march is going to be a 100% outpouring of the disgust and distress of black Americans and white liberals over the way the Congress has handled this bill.
I think that in any such demonstration as the march, which is planned, you will expect loud outpouring of cries, of fears from many, many people who don't want it to take place, who are afraid that something might happen. But it seems to me that it reflects a lack of understanding of the nature of the times in which we are living. the fact that Negroes all over the country are concerned and are aroused and must express their feeling. They've waited 100 years, and that's too long to wait.
But what about white friends and liberals who have worked in these organizations for many years, who now say, look, let's not go this fast. Let's not...
we don't have people like that. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Our telephone is ringing with white people who want to get into the march.
We don't judge our friends on the basis of the color of their skin. We judge them on the basis of the fact of whether or not they are willing to go all the way with us. If they are not willing to go all the way, then they are not friends of ours.
Now, we've said that these are interracial organizations, but you five gentlemen are Negroes. You are assuming the leadership, and you are asking white liberals and white friends to go along with the Negro speaking for himself rather than speaking through white surrogates.
I would like to make this point because I think there is a misconception that any white people who happen to serve on your boards or committees are therefore automatically there to exercise control and restraint. Yeah. This is not the experience of the Urban League. There are many white people who serve on our boards who are asking for more militancy. I speak for the National Urban League at their insistence, not at my demanding, because they feel that a Negro is best able to express the hopes and the longings of his people.
We ought to be clear that there is a desire on the part of Negroes for self-expression through leadership of civil rights organizations. This is important because Negroes have been denied that self-expression for so many years. But this does not mean, in any sense of the word, as far as I'm concerned, that white persons who are sincere cannot participate and cooperate.
Exactly.
And I think it's very important to have this participation. I think it would be very dangerous and even tragic if the struggle in the United States for civil rights degenerated to a racial struggle of blacks against whites, so to speak.
Amen.
It is.
He ain't speaking nothing but facts. And that's that's one of the things that I have, in my head right now. But where we at right now in the world today, you got a group of people, being us, that are figuring out exactly who we are, exactly what happened to us, how we even forgot who in the hell we were. And it's a reason behind that. However, we have to be very, very careful and not go down this slippery slope, because it'll be a tragic situation if we get to the point of a racial divide to that magnitude, if that makes sense. Simply because we have evolved so far as a species and as citizens in this country. It's not, to me now, it's just my opinion, I don't think it's a point of race at this point. I think it's a point of mentality, because you have a lot of people that look like me with the same complexion, same hair texture as me, that's doing more damage to our people than any other race of people can do to us at this point in time. You see what I'm saying? It's a mentality. And if we want to maintain our way of life to a degree, the last thing we need is a race war. Point blank, period. Now, you may feel differently. That's your opinion. You have a right to your opinion just as well as I do. But this is my opinion. And I'm looking at it from an aspect of being in this world, being in the South. I'm in Alabama, man, Phoenix City to be exact. You see what I'm saying? And I understand that my enemy ain't based off of a skin complexion. My enemy is based off of mentality. I digress.
There's a tension between justice and injustice, and we enlist consciences in the struggle. We appreciate the participation in this movement of white persons of goodwill, and we have many of them, fortunately, and I think the number's growing every day. And this helps to keep the struggle on the level that it should be on.
Sure. As far as I can understand you gentlemen, this is not a racist march. This is a march of aroused Americans who want to demonstrate and assume their rights to petition their Congress and support the president's civil rights legislation. The Attorney General would seem to disagree with you in terms of his testimony for Congress. He says that the most disturbing thing for Negroes is the public accommodation segregation.
The truth of the thing is that it's a vicious circle. Unless people are adequately educated, they can't possibly find good jobs. And unless people can find good jobs, they can't buy good housing, which puts them in good neighborhoods where they can get a good education. So instead of being one major thing, it's a group of things.
Yes, that's true, but it seems to me, of course, that the public accommodations matter, which is now being batted around in the Senate Commerce Committee, is the most abrasive and pervasive of the aspects of a Negro's life. Every time he steps out of his front door in the morning until he comes home at night, he runs the risk, and some of them don't run a risk, they run the certainty of this kind of denial and humiliation and mistreatment. And sometimes in the South, as you well know, in many subtle ways, you walk into a store and you're the next one to be waited on, but 3 white people come up and they get waited on first. This is a matter, Negroes meet this. In many places they would have to ride on the back of the bus. And they do want a Coca-Cola and can't get it. Now these seem small things, but then I think the Attorney General was talking about the things that rub people the wrong way and make them say, oh, let's get rid of it, you know.
And, you know, there are other areas of life which are very subtle, but which are not even being covered in the bill. And then there's some pronounced ways. I'm just thinking of the fact that you drive through the South. Yes. In some states, you can't even stop at the restrooms, and this is humiliating to women, you know, and it's very...
And of course, uncomfortable.
Well, it's very uncomfortable, but it's one of these little daily things. But I think that there are 2 areas that should be covered, you know, and that's the question of the voting bill. I don't see why we can't have universal suffrage for all Negroes. I mean, I really don't see why it has to be just a 6th grade educational level, because that's a device, and I think we were talking beforehand about how many people would be covered.
The Nonviolent Coordinating Committee is putting a great deal of its effort on voting, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we have a great program now, I think, in the Delta of Mississippi, but Roy might want to amplify on just how many people would be covered by a 6th grade education.
Well, the literacy test bill, you know, we agreed, we estimated, we couldn't, that not more than 100,000 Negroes would be added to the rolls under the literacy test. This is, Martin, you remarked on the number of people who didn't have a 6th grade education in one state. For 58%, I think it was, in Louisiana.
We testified before the House and suggested universal suffrage. I mean, there's just no...
See, that's crazy, man. So they was trying to pass a literacy test to say that, okay, if you don't have a 6th grade education or the equivalent to a 6th grade education, you can't vote. That is crazy. And we talking about back then. It was a lot of people that didn't have a 6th grade education back then just due to the damn circumstances that they had to grow up in. Think about what I'm saying. So now you're stifling the voice of a people. You see what I'm saying? Just think about this now. You stifling the voice of a people, and you're using something to stifle them that you implemented in the first damn place. So when we look at what go on in Congress and things of that nature, and what's going on in this election cycle, you know, with them, you know, they couldn't figure out who they wanted to be the Speaker of the House. They just had to basically just tap out and say, all right, McCarthy, you got it. You see what I'm saying? But it be these type of tactics that they use, and they've been using it time and time again to stifle the voice of a people. And it's crazy to me, man. That is baffling. 6th grade. Martin said ain't gonna be no more than 100,000 people put on the roll if it went through with the 6th grade literacy test. That's bonkers, man.
no reason why a person is not 21, he can't vote. He can go into the Army whether he can read or write. So why shouldn't he be able to vote?
This trick to get gas for a penny is going to get banned in the U.S. This ex-programmer got fired from his job at a...
And this is no sign that the person isn't intelligent, that the person doesn't have some basic intelligence, but because of discrimination and other conditions, many of these people haven't had an opportunity to get an education, and I think they should have the right to vote, and this is very basic.
No president has recommended a bill of this scope before, regardless of how we who suffer may feel its limitations, and I think we ought to work with that. Dangerous, as Jim has said, Jim Farmer has said, to pick out priorities, and because the opposition will start concentrating on your target. They say, well, what do you think is the number one? And this is, we have to avoid.
Roy, you made the point that no president in certainly my lifetime has made this kind of civil rights recommendation to Congress. Why do you think President Kennedy did this?
He did it because a crisis was created that demanded the attention of the nation on the highest level. Just like, well, a dust bowl is something beyond the state and beyond the region and demands federal action. A great disaster like Texas City demands national action. A great flood demands national action. And here we have a crisis in human rights brought about by one of the, in great part, by all of us, of course, but triggered by a man who sits around this table. And I think there's no doubt that Birmingham dramatized and brought into focus what Martin Luther King and his associates did in Birmingham, made the nation realize that at last the crisis had arrived.
It's necessary, it seems to me, and I just like to throw this out, to keep a considerable amount of pressure on. I mean, that is, the Negro does not, say in Mississippi, for instance, he has no constitutional means, that is, Eastland does not represent him, to achieve some solution, and this has to come from the government, or either he simply has to demonstrate. In other words, segregation may be like a piece of old iron, you put it in the fire to heat it up. And that so that people outside of Mississippi have to become conscious of what is going on there. For instance, there are 45 people in jail right now whose trials were held today for simply being at a voter registration meeting, and someone threw a smoke bomb in the church, and they marched down to the Justice of the Peace Office to protest, or rather to the deputy sheriff, and they were arrested for disturbing the peace. And these are old ladies, some of them 75 years old, but yet they want to stay in jail.
The people that have the vote don't realize how much they could do by writing a letter.
That's right.
A congressman said to me, I have 8 letters on civil rights. 8 from his district. 8. And 5 of those were from white people. Now, you don't have to write a polemic. You just have to write a postcard saying, please vote for the Civil Rights Bill.
In traveling around the country, however, I hear many people make utterances which seem to indicate that they think the millennium will have arrived after we get civil rights legislation. That is not the case. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Even if we get the entire package that the president asked, plus various of the other good bills that are pending before Congress, a good legislation does not automatically enforce itself. We then have a problem of seeing to it that it is enforced in town after town, city after city, and only the will of the people will bring about the enforcement.
I would like to say,
But he dead on, boy, he was dead on with that statement right there, and that's where we at with it right now. It's legislation, just because it is made and it gets passed into law, that don't mean that we automatically get the kumbaya moment. No, you have to do the work. You have to ensure from town to town, from principality to principality, ensure that this is actually taking place. You know why? Because it's law now. Now, see, like I said before, I'm in the South. I'm in Alabama. And to this day, it's some towns in Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, that you don't even want to go through. Because this is still an issue. It's still a problem. And another thing, while I got it paused real quick, I don't think we understand the testicular fortitude that these men had. They were nonviolent, they were rational, and they were speaking God's truth. Point blank, period. See, we can't turn around and be like our oppressors and act like them and do the same indignified acts that they did to us. We can't sit here and just have a bloodlust or say, okay, since we can't get what we want, we'll burn everything down, this, that, and the third. No, with that's never an answer. Point blank, period. That's not the godly thing to do, first of all. You see what I'm saying? And these men going through everything they had went through, being ridiculed, being patronized, being hosed, dog sicked on them, hit with billy clubs, killed, sacrificed. They still had the wherewithal to keep it in the proper bounds that it needed to be in order for humanity to move forward. That's the only thing these guys are saying. This is humanity moving forward. But the opposition was so real, the opposition was so wicked, the opposition was so evil that they did not want to give God's creation the proper rights that God said every being should have. Think about this. See, we go off of this mainstream media, then we go to the alternative media and the conspiracy theories and things of that nature. And now these guys that's on your screen right now, their legacy gets tainted because of some bullshit or some bullshit opinion that some knucklehead had because they weren't militant enough for some shit. You see what I'm saying? Like, no, bro, you got to understand that was never the case. Like, we have to understand that this is America. Point blank, period. Everybody's here. Ain't nobody going nowhere. That go back to Africa shit, that shit was dead. We here. So what we gonna do about it? Can we all coexist? Yeah, we can coexist. And that's the only thing that they were saying. But the powers that be at the time, due to this myth that we call white supremacy, didn't want to let that go. Now the question is, the thing that you got to ask yourself is, why? Why they didn't want to let that go? And I'm going to answer it from my perspective. And I'm going to say it was fear. Because in a certain mindset out here, you got to have a superiority and you got to have an inferiority. You got to have somebody that's on the top. You got to have somebody that's on the bottom. Now, do I agree with that thought process? No, I don't. I believe that is only the case when you have a certain mentality. Now, everybody can't lead, and you got to have followers. Point blank, period. But regardless, everybody should have the same civil rights. You feel me? Love, peace, the pursuit of happiness, this great American dream. Everybody is supposed to be able to tap into that. But back then, in 1963, that wasn't the case, y'all. This country had to be built on somebody's back. Somebody had to be the lesser, and somebody had to be the most. And until we are able to break that thought process, we're going to continuously repeat that cycle continuously. And that's what has to stop, because we're still in that cycle to a degree. Point blank, period. We all experience it some type of way. It might not be as heavy as it was back then. The gravity may not weigh as much as it did back then, but it's still here. But now it's changed. Now it goes past the boundaries of race or color. Now it's a mentality. And again, our biggest enemy right now is the same thing that they talking about, but it ain't about race. It's about a mentality. Because it's people of all races in that pool that want to keep people downhill while they live lofty with their titles and with their positions.
Say that I have faith that the American people today are sufficiently convinced of the determination of Negroes to be truly free and the rightness of that aspiration, that I will be terribly disappointed if there is not a tremendous amount of support from all people for this legislation. But I would agree with Jim Farmer that this will just be, to me, the beginning. It's sometimes a lot easier to get people to walk a picket line than to walk to the library, or to get people to participate, parents to demonstrate, than it is to go to PTA meetings.
One of the heartening things about this aroused conscience that Martin spoke of a moment ago is the unprecedented activity of the organized faiths, the organized religious faiths. I think we're going places on this, but I'd like to put in a little sour note here. And I get some mail that I can't read on television, that I can't exhibit, and the postmaster delivers like this, holding it up by the people who say that Negroes ought to go back to Africa, and you're only apes anyway, and you think we're going to give you a civil rights bill, you're crazy, and we'll run you in the Mississippi River first, and a whole lot of other uncomplimentary things.
I'm really more concerned about the so-called gentle people of prejudice. The people who will say, I'm with you, I am for you, but what about property values, you know, and the man's right to run his business, and what about the standards of the school being lowered? And so for these reasons, who would say, well, maybe you shouldn't have all of this right now. These are the people I'm really concerned about.
May I comment on that? I agree with you completely. While I share Roy's concern about the extreme bigots, I'm far more concerned about the good, the decent people who don't throw a bomb as they do in Birmingham or other places in the South, but they quietly pack their bags and move away. And this, it seems to me, is more damaging to our cause and more dangerous to the total cause of integration.
I have an answer for you, gentlemen, but go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, well, I'm concerned about the one in between going back to Africa and moving away, and that's basically the public officials, you see, who inflict all of this brutality, because the millennium is not going to come, primarily because we have no laws to deal with police brutality in the South, which I...
Ooh, it's 1963, y'all. And niggas still dying by police in 2023. Bruh, come on, man. This 60 years later. Think about what we saying, man. Everything each one of them just said is still going on. You still got your passive, you still have the passive ones that ain't throwing bombs and ain't out here doing all this, but they'll pack up their bags and leave. They'll go pool their money together and build a whole community. And then when black folks start getting their money up and the racial profiling part really falls into the water because they got the money to end up being where these people done move to. When it's too many black people that move into this community or whatnot, what happens? Well, they pack their bags again. and they go somewhere else. You see what I'm saying? You also have those public officials that allow certain things to happen. And there's no repercussions for the type of action that they've done. And hint the police when they can take the life of a young black man or a young black woman and it's justified. Even though everything that we see on social media, on the news, or whatever says otherwise, it still ends up happening. That's why I say these guys are giants, because this is nothing new that we've been going through, but we got to we have to reconnect with where did it all start? When did we start voicing our opinion to the point of, look, this ain't right. This is what we're going through. What are we gonna do? See, we done dropped the ball. If those giants was around today and was able to see exactly where we at with our, if they can see where we were at as a culture, as a people in this society, they would roll around in their graves. Because we have become a pacified people. Period. No matter your color, if you stand up for right, we become pacified because of certain, what's the word I'm looking for? Certain allowances that we have been able to achieve. And what are these allowances? Financial allowances. Lofty titles that give us a certain power, so to say. And once some of us, once we get in a position, it's like we forget about the rest of us. And so I think that the powers that be, they understood that. And so what they were trying to do was identify those that they can pay off and bring them into their circle and let them be the face of shitting on the rest of their people. Because there is nothing in my head right now to make me think that if, as a collective, if we still had this same type of mentality that these gentlemen right here in this interview are talking about, that we couldn't be a whole lot further in this situation than we are right now. Point blank, period. It's no different. It's no different than pulling the employee from the floor, making him a supervisor, teaching him the way of this, that, and the third, and then having him to do your dirty work. And I think that's, well, we really got bamboozled.
I think is a fundamental issue in this whole
Well,
thing.
Jim, I suppose you are very conscious of this because your membership is on the firing line, and
yeah, and I've seen
daily
people,
the victims of police.
Dr. King just came from Danville, and over a month ago we saw 35 people with holes in their heads as big as a ashtray, inflicted by the police. And nothing has been done about it. And the government, seems to me, ought to do something about this.
What specifically would you suggest for dealing with this?
Well, I would suggest, you see, that the government go in and file some suits. When the constitutional rights of a person is denied, the government ought to file a suit in behalf of that person. I think this gets back to part 3.
That's right.
Now, the government says that the existing laws are inadequate, but yet they're not asking, or it is not asking, for adequate laws in this legislation.
I think the only thing that changes the mind of a policeman like that is to sue him and to convict him and to convince him that the Constitution has some control over that billy club he has in his hand.
Bruh, ain't nobody been sued, ain't nobody been convicted. You name me the last person that really got convicted. That got convicted now.
Is there anyone who is planning?
Name me the last person that got the last police that got convicted of killing a unarmed young black man. They all beat the charges. And talking about sued, man, we don't see no silver cases coming up against these folks. They protected by the letter of the law. Now, this man just sat here and said what we've been saying since we've been here on this world. I was born in 80. I wasn't even thought about it. I just told y'all, my mama was 5 years old back in 1963. I wasn't even thought about it. But here it is. I can pull this video up and recollect and see the same issues. And we have to ask ourselves, like, why? Why we see the same issues? Ain't no way these people could continuously do this to us. That ain't the issue. The issue is they took folk that looked like us and made them the face of this civil rights thing, and they went along to get along. They ain't speaking up. We ain't got no more giants in our community. Well, I ain't gonna say in our community. We ain't got no more mainstream giants like them guys with giants back in that gap. No. The ones we got now, they talk about prosperity. They ain't talking about equality. They ain't talking about equity. They ain't talking about civil rights. They ain't talking about God's law. Simple things that every person with an intellect, if you're not obese, like they used to treat us like we didn't have intellect. Think about this. And it's not like this was something that had always happened. No, this was implemented for a reason, for a system of hierarchy in America. So you can have a superiority and an inferiority. And as long as white people were held in a superior fashion, it was okay. And we see it time and time again. Now again, man, I ain't got nothing against white people, but we just got to call a spade, right or wrong or wrong. Now my whole thing is, how in the hell in 60 years are we still having a lot of the same problems that these gentlemen are speaking of back then?
Planning to do this, Roy?
Well, now we're entering into one of the most difficult areas of civil rights, because the whole area of convicting a policeman for depriving a man of his civil rights has to be proved down to the last period and comma. Not only that, his intent has to be proved.
Jim?
Yes, I think we have an additional weapon, and that is the ballot.
Yes,
the vote, and which is why all of us here are pushing a voter registration drive. If Negroes are registered in large numbers down there in Greenwood, then the police, of course, will take a different point of view. And in Danville also.
Exactly.
Because they'll know then that they have to be responsible and responsive not only to white voters, but to Negro voters as well.
White people in the South and in the North need education on this matter. I don't mean education on humanity as to Negroes, but they need education on the constitutional rights of Negroes and on the fact that he's a citizen. He's been here 344 years, and to hear some of them talk, they'd say, look what we're doing for you people.
Mm-hmm. If you've never been in Mississippi, and Roy was born, and I just have to get back because I think I have to just try to
was born there.
help her. Well, I'm sorry, your family was. I was raised down there, and I want to talk about these people. See, I think the president ought to go through Mississippi because I don't think he has any conception, any visual conception. Intellectually, he knows the suffering that's going on there. But just to see some of these shacks that people are living in, it's frightening in a sense, you know, down in Itabena. You know, it's just a very depraved area.
Itabena?
Yeah.
I've been to Itabena.
Isn't it a depraved?
Oh,
it's
really
just
something.
pitiful.
Well,
And
I think what we need to get at here is if we could get the total society to somehow lose this making a god of state rights and begin to see citizens as national citizens.
Right.
Because what's actually happened in this country is much of the miseducation, lack of education altogether, much of the social disorganization we see in the North that concerns us can directly be traced back to the indifference of the people in the North to the problems of the South. Right. These people later become the welfare load, the crime rate of the North. If we had adopted the concept of a citizen in Mississippi being a citizen of the United States, right, then we would have avoided all these problems. Yeah. That's the way they're seen overseas.
That's right.
I think the president ought not only look at the housing in Mississippi, he ought to look at the slum tenements in Harlem and in 100 Harlems across the country. Indeed, we might say that our people are not only being bitten by dogs in Birmingham, yeah, Reverend King, but rats, by the rats in the slum tenements. Yeah.
Well, aren't we saying, gentlemen, that a program has not yet been worked out to grapple with the magnitude of this problem in the United States, both North and South?
It's not regional.
So right.
Isn't there a need now, because of the urgency and the seriousness of the situation, to develop a sort of crash program to lift the standards of the Negro and to get rid of the underlying conditions that produce so many social evils and develop so many social problems? I think this is what we face at this time, and I know it leads to the whole question of discrimination in reverse and all of that, but I think we've got to face the fact in this country that because of the legacy of slavery and segregation and the seeds of injustice planted in the past, that we have this harvest of confusion now, and we're going to continue to have it until we get to the root of the problem.
Well, that's that root and the rats go together.
Yeah.
The announcement of the Real Estate Brokers Association some time ago advising their members not to pay any attention to fair housing laws, that property rights still came first. And when you think of the billions of dollars in this country tied up in real estate, there isn't much that the President of the United States could do by going and looking at some slums. Let's be fair.
Yeah. Well,
the real power and obstacle there is the property right structure in this country, which isn't concerned with how many kids are bitten by rats or how many people live in slums.
Most of you recall that we did announce recently, our board adopted this domestic Marshall Plan, and this was consciously given this name because, if you recall, this country has spent some $12 billion on rehabilitation of Europe, war-torn Europe. In a 4-year period, we have spent millions on refugees from Cuba and from Hungary. We spent all kinds of money giving free education to veterans after the war and making it possible for them to buy homes. I think the time has come for us to honestly face up to the fact that this tremendous gap due to historical deprivation that the Negro has suffered will not be closed not quickly enough unless we consciously and deliberately establish programs that call not just for equal schools but better schools and better teachers and provisions for housing and conscious recruiting at the level of employment. This has to be done in order to get rid of what I see too much of, and that is the feeling of despair and hopelessness.
I think that Negroes have had special treatment in this country for 350 years. Special treatment of a negative sort.
That's right.
Now what Whitney and the rest of us are asking for is some special treatment of a positive sort to wipe out that gap.
Are you united in this, or is there any...
well, I want to be understood on it.
But I'm not asking people to hire people who aren't qualified.
And we're not asking them to skip over white people or to deny white people their chance, but we're saying that just giving the Negro an equal break is not enough.
I wonder, gentlemen, if you're in asking for this special break, you're not asking for a special break for the nation rather than just for the Negro.
Oh, indeed. Look, if this country, they don't solve the human rights problem of the Negro.
right.
The manpower problem.
This country morally is sunk. Absolutely.
Well, what about practical manpower? Resources.
They've been suffering from manpower all along, and I anticipate what Jim's going to say. Not only morally sunk, but they'll be sunk.
They'll be sunk economically, too.
Economically, politically, and morally.
The President's Council of Economic
economically, politically, and morally. And let me tell y'all what we seeing right now, good people. We're seeing the demise of America economically, politically, and morally. Right now, today, these folk couldn't even decide on who they wanted to be Speaker of the House. Ain't nobody taking the president seriously. They talking about they finna default on their loan because I don't know the political term for it, but they at their limit. Morally, look at what's going on the TV. Look how much shit we can see that we don't supposed to see. Look at the Balenciaga shit and all this shit. Man, we crashing. And why are we crashing? Because you're treating a certain people that you had no business to treat a certain type of way. Now we done got so far out the way of what the civil rights thing was. Again, you done recruited people that look like us. These folks done went and took these checks, and now they working for the damn folks that were keeping their damn thumb on our goddamn necks. Think about what I'm saying. Yeah, y'all don't want to hear it, but your entertainers, they all with it. You think these folks getting these goddamn $30, $40 million damn contracts to beat your people? No. They got these $30, $40 million contracts to keep you dumb, desperate, and destitute. Period. But we love them. Want to be like them. Want to dress like them. Want to act like them. Want to imitate everything they saying in their music and shit. Only thing we got to do is look at it. But it don't matter how it comes. The repercussions are going to be the repercussions. The country's going to die. Because you can't continue to operate like that with people as such. Period. I digress.
Economic advisor said some months ago that discrimination in jobs against Negroes costs the country something like $13 billion a year.
If you gentlemen are correct that it cannot survive without instituting justice, is it possible that the society will choose not to survive rather than to...
Not consciously.
Not consciously.
Not consciously.
Well...
No, I seem to sense that increasingly more people are beginning to see integration as an opportunity and not just a problem. The fact
are
that
these only articulate people, though? Are these only the people to whom you talk? What about the masses of American whites? Could it be that they are so conditioned to hate Negroes that they would rather see the society go under rather than to provide...
I want to ask y'all a question. Leave it in the comments. Do you think integration helped us or hurt us? Because, you know, I got Malcolm sitting up here on my wall, and I know how he felt about it. He felt like we should maintain our segregation, you know? But what you think? Did integration help us or did integration hurt us?
Politicians might articulate.
No, the average white person in this country doesn't want to see his country go under rather than give a fair deal to the Negro. He believes in a fair deal, but he also wants to protect himself and his job, and I don't blame him.
I have read a number of writers on this, and the most eloquent of the writers seem to me to be Mr. Baldwin.
What about rights? That is one term that everyone loves in America. The right, the left, the wokies, the libertarians. There's a broad consensus that in America we have rights.
One of the founders mockingly put it, what are we going to put in our Bill of Rights? The right to get up when you want, go to sleep when you want? You can't list all the rights. That's all the possible things that human beings could do.
And if I read underneath his lines, there seems to be a deep sense that maybe the American white man is not prepared for survival and justice. But as I listen to you gentlemen talk, you do seem much more optimistic than this, Jim.
Well, Kenneth, I would not go so far as to say that the American white man is prepared not to survive in order to avoid giving Negroes equal rights. But I will say that I would not be prepared at the moment to put our cause to a general referendum in this country.
No.
I don't think we'd win it.
I don't think civil rights are negotiable.
I think I could almost predict what the figure would be.
Of course.
2-1 against you.
I'm sure it would be.
Well, isn't it true that we're grappling with a problem that constantly emerges in history, that you have a few people who are crusaders in the right direction. You always have a few people who are crusaders in the wrong direction. And the vast majority are out there in the middle somewhere with a great deal of apathy and complacency. And I think we have this in our country today. The vast majority of people are not active integrationists or active segregationists. They are passive adherents to the status quo.
But
and
they
I
have
think
been
the
socialized
job,
in a society in which racism is dominant.
I agree, and I think the job here is for the creative minority to work on this large group, because I think these people are pliable to the legitimate and just demands of the Negro. And I do.
Boy, now you see why this man was such a giant, boy. He sat back, he ain't said much the whole damn interview. But then when he said that one right there, boy, he just dropped the mic. See, it ain't never been a whole lot of people that made change, bro. Trust me when I'm telling you this. It's always a small group that inflicts change. They're the crusaders. And it's our job because I know I'm in that group. I'm being honest with you. I wouldn't even be up here making this video if I wasn't in that group. But it's our job to get this majority of people on our side for the righteousness, the righteous cause. Because just like we working to benefit humanity, you got some out here that's selfish. You got a whole nother small group that's selfish as fuck, and they just looking at what they want to do. Point blank, period. But the vast multitude, the majority of the population, they don't give a fuck which way we go. They just know to adhere to the way we're going. Whatever the policy is, they know to adhere to it. They're sheep. It ain't a lot of goats out here. The majority of the people are sheep. They don't want to think about what they need to do. They want to be told what they need to do. They want to be told how to operate. They don't want to fuck with their brain like, man, now I got to think about how I need to operate. Everybody ain't everybody's not on that intellectual capacity. Some people are just, their brain would literally explode if they had to think like that. You see what I'm saying? But that's it. And it's crazy again, because this was 60 years ago, bro. So.
Do not choose to follow the path of despair, because I think that there is a way out, even though we do have to face the problems that have developed and the conditioning that has developed as a result of this problem existing a long time. But I do think there is a way out, and I think that with the creative minority standing up with determination to solve this problem, we can solve it.
Whenever the American people have been faced with a crisis, they've come through. Now, they may have come through in ragged and bloody fashion, but they've come through. And I'm convinced that they'll come through this one, even though it involves very deep-seated emotions. I think they're going to solve it.
I've always had the feeling that one of the major problems was that the average white citizen somehow drew a correlation between status and exclusiveness, and in many cases racial exclusiveness, so that the more exclusive the neighborhood, the school, the place of employment, the higher his status. Now, I think...
But he's been taught not to like you either.
Yes, but now...
Not to like you because of the color of your skin.
Yes, but now he must be taught that this is a sign of his basic insecurity. That for years, as Baldwin put it, he has had a reason, a need to feel superior. Now we must change the norm and get people to understand that it is insecurity that makes you want to take advantage and to hate. That only the secure people now can move toward inclusiveness. It is the more intelligent, the more mature people who want this kind of thing, and only the tragically insecure need today to surround themselves with sameness.
Gentlemen, I certainly want to thank you for what certainly is the most stimulating and to me quite instructive discussion. I think that America is indeed fortunate to have men of your breadth, your perspective, your sense of responsibility and intelligence as the leaders of probably the most significant social revolution since the 18th century. It's certainly
Big facts. Big facts, big facts. We would not be here today if it weren't for those giants. Trust me, everything has to happen for a reason, right? Everything has to happen for a reason. And if it wasn't for those guys picking up the baton, when they picked up the baton, I'm keeping it a book. We wouldn't be here right now. And think about it. Honestly, think about it. Some of the same issues that we're going through right now, they were speaking on then. So we have to ask ourselves a question. What we gonna do about it? This ain't no snap of a finger, everything changed situation. The only thing that they were talking about was the basic civil rights of humanity. And out of all of humanity, in the United States of America, where we at, we were the one getting shitted on most. And there was no rightful explanation for it. And the explanation that was used was we ain't shit. We're not even human. And them guys had the wherewithal, the class, the fortitude to not get violent, but use their intellectual capacity to show their opposition and to show the people truth. That's how we get here today. Now it's on us to turn it up a notch. We still have some rights issues. You know what I mean? But ultimately, it all be turned around by understanding who the hell we are. See, it's still certain falsehoods that are out there that have to be checked and have to be corrected. And that's where we at. That's our job. It's people out here walking around talking about they us and they ain't us. You feel me? So I'm gonna leave it right there, y'all. I hope y'all appreciated it. If you didn't, I don't think you'll be tuned in to the end right now. But if you watch the video through its entirety, man, make sure you hit the subscription button for me. Make sure you hit that like button. You know, the like button, the more likes we get, the more we upset the algorithm. So we need to make sure we get the likes up on it. Tell me what you think in the comments, man. Tell me how you feel. You know, just be respectful to the other people that'll comment too. You know what I mean? This ain't no disrespectful site. We ain't even operating like that. But leave your thoughts in the comments, man. I appreciate each and every last one of y'all. Next video coming real soon. Schedule will die down a little bit so I can get a little bit more consistent, man. Appreciate each and every last one of y'all, you know, from the bottom of my heart. This is what we do. Share light, spread love, getting the message out here. I am Keith Daniel. This is the Daniel Diagnosis. Till the next time we meet, good people. Peace.